All right, whether you're on a vegan diet, thinking about starting a vegan diet, or just you love science, either way, this video is for you. Check it out. So today we're going to talk about protein in the vegan diet. And the reason we're going to bring this up is because a lot of plant-based proteins are actually deficient in what are called essential amino acids. So there's 20 different amino acids that make up protein. And 11 of them are what we call non-essential, meaning our body's able to produce these on its own. But then 9 are essential, meaning we actually have to get them from our diet. It's very important we do get these from our diet, otherwise our body's not able to go through protein synthesis quite as well. And a lot of plant products are deficient in certain ones of these 9 essential amino acids, whereas animal proteins are not deficient in these amino acids. And in addition to the deficiencies, there's also an issue with absorption of the protein that comes from plant products. And this happens to be because a lot of the protein is bound up in this fibrous material. So when you take in plant-based protein, you don't actually get all of that absorbed into your bloodstream. And so if you're going on a vegan diet, it is very important to think about what types of plant-based proteins you're getting in and then how much you're getting in. Because there are plant-based proteins that are not deficient in these essential amino acids. So you have to consider what protein are you taking in and what may it be deficient in. Because again, it is very important that you do get the recommended intake of these essential amino acids. And one particular paper that we're going to talk about, what they did is they were utilizing the recommended daily intake of protein. And this happens to be 0.8 grams per kilogram, which we're going to save for another video to talk about why that number is not necessarily the goal that you should have for protein intake. It should be a lot higher. But the 0.8 is a guideline recommended by the USDA to show that you're not in a catabolic state, breaking down tissue, and you're not in an anabolic state. You're kind of at this plateau where you're not losing weight, not gaining weight. So it's the absolute minimum requirement protein intake for people. And so they used 0.8 grams per kilogram, and they took 18 individuals that had been vegan for an average of about 7 years. It ranged from 1 to 23 years being vegan. So they were habituated to this diet or adapted to this diet, let's say. And what they did is they matched the amount of calories that they were burning per day, which is referred to as a eucaloric diet. So if you matched or in a eucaloric diet, you shouldn't gain or shouldn't lose weight. And they made sure that they were hitting 0.8 grams per kilogram of protein, and it was plant-based protein here. And what they wanted to see is if you have this minimum intake of protein, 0.8 grams per kilogram, and if it's made up of plant protein, then are you able to build muscle? Are you able to retain lean mass? And so they did this for 5 days, and then on the 5th day, they measured the nitrogen excretion in these participants' urine. So over the course of 24 hours, they were looking at how much nitrogen was in the urine. And the reason they did this is to assess what's called nitrogen balance. So when you take in protein, that's your body's only source of nitrogen that it's getting in. And you can measure the amount of nitrogen that's excreted. And if you're excreting more nitrogen than you're taking in, you're in what's called a negative nitrogen balance. A negative nitrogen balance indicates you're in a catabolic state, or you're breaking down lean body mass. And what they found is at a eucaloric diet, so again, taking in the same amount of calories that they're expending, a plant-based protein supplement at this 0.8 grams per kilogram resulted in a negative nitrogen balance, in that these individuals were in a catabolic state, which means they're not able to build lean mass. This is important to consider because, if you're trying to shoot for the 0.8, which is often recommended in a clinical setting, and you're using a plant-based protein, you are not going to be able to build lean body mass, and your body's actually going to be breaking that lean body mass down, which is not healthy. Okay, so we know that we need to increase protein intake quite a bit when we're on a plant-based protein source. And another study, what they did is they want to see, okay, how much protein do you actually need if it's plant-based to stimulate protein synthesis? Protein synthesis is the process your body's going to go through to build muscle. And again, we don't want to break down muscle. We want to be in a state of either preserving it or building it. And so we know 0.8 grams per kilogram of plant-based protein is not going to get us there. But this paper, what they did is actually compared plant-based protein to animal-based protein. In this case, it was milk-based whey protein. And they took 30 grams and had individuals, they had 24 participants, 2 on each side, and they actually blinded them so they didn't know what leg of the study they were in. Are they getting the whey protein? Are they getting the plant-based protein? And they had them take this 30-gram bolus of protein, either plant-based or milk-based, and then they measured the response after taking that protein in. So they labeled the protein so that they could detect it in the blood and also in the muscle. And for 5 hours after taking that protein in, they looked at how much circulating amino acids are in the blood and what was the stimulus or what was the protein synthesis response there. So they took muscle samples of the vastus lateralis, a muscle in the leg, and were able to look at protein synthesis rates. And they measured those over time and compared, can a plant-based protein at 30 grams stimulate protein synthesis at the same level of a milk-based whey protein? Because we know animal-based proteins are absorbed at a much higher rate. You absorb almost 100% of the protein you're taking in when it's in this whey form versus a lower amount when it's in the plant-based form. And so, not surprising, what they found is the amount of certain essential amino acids. In this case, they looked at leucine, lysine, and methionine. Those amino acids were lower from the plant-based protein, which again, we'd expect because your body doesn't absorb quite as much of it. But when they looked at protein synthesis rates, those were the same between both groups. And this is important to note. So when you take in this 30-gram plant-based protein, you still do get the same amount of protein synthesis, but it does require that 30 grams. So if you're not hitting that 30 grams, you're probably not going to get this level of protein synthesis that you would see on a lower amount of animal-based proteins. Another important thing to note is they didn't just use any regular plant-based protein. They actually combined different proteins. So they took 15 grams of wheat protein, 7.5 grams of pea protein, and then 7.5 grams of corn protein. And the reason they did this is to address for those deficiencies that certain plant-based proteins have. So wheat protein, for example, is low in lysine. Corn protein is low in lysine and tryptophan, but also really high in leucine. And then pea protein is low in methionine. So when you combine all these together, you can address for those deficiencies that we see with plant-based proteins. And so taken together, what these two papers kind of tell us is this idea that plant-based protein, it's important to, one, blend different proteins together so you can address for these common deficiencies and also get a larger amount. So it's not just the quantity of protein that is important, but also the quality. So if you're considering going on a vegan diet, you do want to know what types of protein you're getting in and be intentional about these things. Because again, you want to be able to build muscle, you want to be able to retain muscle. So it can be healthy, it just takes a lot more effort there.